Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Modern Data Stack, Roadblocks, and New Possibilities webinar. We're going to give it a few minutes while everybody joins, and we will get started here shortly. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Erik Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Seek. I am joined by Luke Stanke from Sigma and Ryan Johnson from Seek as well. Today, we're here to talk about the modern data stack, both the pros, cons, the roadblocks, the new possibilities. What does the modern data stack mean for you and your company and for the analytics ROI that you're trying to generate across your business? Before we get started, we're going to chat about the tale of the typical modern data stack as we see it across our customers, partners, and more. And one of the biggest things that we hear from customers and partners when it comes to the modern data stack is the challenge that the budgets they're having to maintain to keep up with the modern data stack are increasing significantly year over year. In some cases, you'll see companies that are doubling their spend every year on different types of tools and data and things like that. But according to Forbes, Forbes has estimated that the annual budget will have to increase by 15% per year to keep up with the demands of the modern data stack. For those of you keeping track, that means it's going to double over the next 5 years. And for our customers and customers of Sigma's, I think doubling your budget over the next 5 years can be a pretty steep hill to climb. As we think about why that is, let's talk a little bit about the typical modern data stack journey as we see it in the market. The first step of the typical modern data stack is to identify and procure third-party data. These are large data sets that are providing a ton of value to businesses when they can leverage them. But if they aren't using them at scale and in the right manners, these become just really expensive piles of data within the organization that aren't generating the value that they're supposed to be. The second year of the modern data stack is typically focused on taking the data sets you acquired in year one and turning them into dashboards. It's typically dedicated to the reporting world. So how do we use the data that we have, maybe bring some sources together and create dashboards that then the organization can consume? Year three is then typically when organizations recognize that dashboards are not quite enough to get the value out of the data and the tooling that they've invested in. And so they start to think about how they can go beyond the dashboards, whether that's creating individual silos, whether it's creating new data science teams, data analytics teams, et cetera. Organizations usually in year three are now focused on trying to go beyond the value of dashboards that they've spent the last couple of years building. And then year four is typically focused on identifying all of the sort of tangled mess that we've created underneath the surface of the modern data stack with all the different tools, the dashboards, the siloed data, siloed applications, the teams and resources that are dedicated to providing value from this. And really, despite every organization's heroic efforts to turn this into ROI, most teams are spending a significant amount of money and generating not even remotely close to the ROI that they thought they would at the outset. We're going to chat a little bit about that today, why that is, and how we see the landscape evolving over the next couple of years. And with that, I would like to introduce Luke Stanke from Sigma and Ryan Johnson from Seek. Luke, if you want to go ahead and give a quick intro for yourself, that'd be great.
Yes, very excited to be here. My formal title is product evangelist. That is for those wondering, I just help Sigma in many different ways, whether that's with product, with marketing, sales, sort of all the different parts of our business I'm here to support on any given day. And I think I have this unique experience of being a practitioner for more than, greater than the last decade, and seeing how the landscape of both data and analytics and technically AI have evolved in the past 15 plus years. So I'm excited to be here and join this discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. Ryan, over to you.
Absolutely. My name is Ryan Johnson. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Seek. Basically been here since the start, building out our cloud infrastructure, our app development framework, and everything in between. Generally hang out more on the technical side of things, trying to understand what does it mean? And if anything, we've looked at this in my previous journey, even some of the engineers that have come over with me with this company, we've looked at this sort of history of putting together multiple modern data stacks and but 15 years of history of this and looking at how the landscape has changed as well. And from our perspective is that we're looking at this as an opportunity to kind of redefine what this means and building out a platform that can host all these things and these applications going forward.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing slides as this is more focused on just a conversation between the three of us. So to kick off the conversation, I think all three of us have had the opportunity to not only be part of a team that was building the modern data stack or trying to build what they thought was the modern data stack, but all of us have now been on the other side of the equation, helping people build what they would consider the modern data stack. With that said, Luke, maybe I'll start with you. When you think about your personal experience of building these types of solutions, were there challenges that you ran into as you were building that led you to now recommend different things to your customers that you work with today?
I think the challenges in the early days of the modern data stack is really, and I want to really define a little bit of that up front here. So for me, modern data stack equates to the fact that there has been an evolution of what the stack looks like today, and that everything was on-prem and generally not designed for the cloud, and then therefore that limited data volumes. And with the unlock of now having both cloud compute and cloud warehousing available, that created this proliferation of data, or really accessibility to data in many ways. And that, so like, to just like have this discussion now that we have this really whole new environment that is extremely more accessible. In the early days of this revolution, if you will, there wasn't as much data, frankly. Like if there's a defining characteristic of how would I think about it, my brain wasn't thinking in terms of how large big data was actually going to get, right? Big data 15 years ago, just think about it like 2010-ish in that zone, you're talking about a couple million records and you're like, oh, I can build around this. This is easily scalable. When we're talking about maybe 10 million records at that time that I'm operating from, it can give you a sense of the scale of the organizations that I was working at that level. But really, that's sort of like really pushing compute as far as it went. As the ecosystem evolved, data grew, and then it became, there's so many more, I will say, niche data needs as a result of having so much more around it. And as you build all these niche needs, you end up having different silos and different stakeholders that need different components added to this universe. And that it became so easy then, because there's SaaS and it's so easy and so accessible, you're adding on to help support this line of business. And that feels right because you're reading about the ecosystem itself, and everything's about best in breed, because this world has not evolved yet. It started out so incredibly simple. Right? It's like we're rebuilding everything that existed on-prem, and we're putting it in SaaS. And as soon as it existed, it was like, great, I finally have this product that's missing from that core platform. So you ended up with the modern data stack equating to best in breed because the product simply didn't exist. Now we're in a different world where it's matured, and best in breed is fine if you have that, but the reality is that you really need to be able to have a unified platform for where you're doing all this work. So if again, coming back to the exact question around like how's it changed for me? It's changed significantly, and it has to do with the maturity of the technology behind it all.
Yeah, I think what's super funny for me thinking back historically is, again, in one of my roles, I remember being what was considered one of the more advanced business users for analytics. And I remember my sort of biggest moment of showing analytics skills was asking somebody for a raw data feed. That was like brilliant back in the day. It was like, oh man, if somebody asked for a raw data feed, they must be really smart. And I think, again, that's how the modern data stack first existed, because people were like, oh man, if they can make sense of 1 million rows of data, they can do some incredible
Added,
things.
make it feel it live streaming data to go with it, where it was like, this is unbelievable. This is so revolutionary. You have to be so to be able to architect and pipeline this information somewhere and make it accessible the way it was. And now it's changed.
Yeah, now that's table stakes. So as we think about that, Ryan, from the technology perspective, I know Luke and I represent a blend of technology and business experience. From your perspective as a technologist, what does the modern data stack mean to you, and how has it evolved over the last couple of years?
I was going to piggyback actually on, Luke's comment there with the phrase of best of breed, right? Because if you think about it, I completely agree with that evolution of saying that the first sort of phase of that year one for almost any group when they're talking about how to build these things is accumulation of data, right? Third party, internally, how do you, bring together disparate systems? How do you integrate, different data feeds and all that kind of stuff? And I think that's where the problem starts. And then when we talk about like best of breed tooling, right, is that now everyone's sort of in this phase, I would say, that I have seen, which is like there's 8 different breeds. There's like 8 different steps you have to take to even get it to the point to get your raw data. Now that it's all accumulated, maybe in one place, if that, is that you have to start investing in the people and the tools, right? When we start about technology, my purview as well has been, well, how do you source the data experts and the data tools that you need as well, and make a scalable company and a scalable process for that? And so it's more than ever, more and more difficult to hire the data experts or even find them to that. I mean, if you've ever done hiring for data scientists, if you've ever done hiring for a data engineer today, you know how difficult it is. You're competing with a very, very small percentage of the market of people that are experts that know how to do that. And then in the case of like piecemealing or these fragmented tools that you need to do, data integration, to feature development, to, the bronze, silver, gold medallion series of getting data engineered to the point that you can even start looking at good data for your team. It's immense, right? So from my perspective, like, hey, modern data stack is the direction, but it is also causing so many, let's say, bottlenecks within your company as well.
Yeah, so let's dive into the pain points that we're seeing. So I think, Ryan, what you identified there is the modern data stack doesn't just mean technology. It means, so obviously, Luke mentioned data, Ryan, you mentioned technology. I think one of the other things that's super interesting that you mentioned is that the modern data stack requires a ton of people.
Yeah.
And people with very specialized skill sets. And so, at Seek, one of the things that we always chat with our customers about is that there's 4 major pain points that our customers are feeling across any vertical. And it's they don't have time, they don't have people, they don't have all the data they need, and frankly, they don't have the budget to go solve those first 3. And so as you think about how the modern data stack has evolved, it's required more data, more technology, more people, and frankly, more money. And so, Luke, as we think about how people are spending their money on the modern data stack, do we see today that money being spent on one single tool to kind of rule them all, or are we seeing organizations spread that money so thin that it becomes hard to manage on their end?
Just this is personal experiences from having worked in the last few years on this exact challenge is that, so the first part, they're not necessarily picking a single platform. There's always going to be a need for many platforms. And what I mean by platform is that what is the data ecosystem going to sit around and in and support? So there's certainly going to be a need there. But the overall trend is around consolidation of managing that technology. And the reason is that, well, you've given the time and expertise, is budget and people, which is related to budget. And that ultimately that the future of what the modern data stack looks like in terms of the technology, it's going to be a lot tighter, because it comes back down to the point of how are you going to manage many platforms, who's going to own it, and then and maintain it. And then again, separate is like, what is it going to cost from just from the licensing standpoint? And so money is, for me, the biggest driver around what's going to be happening here.
Yeah, I think, one thing that we see, and Ryan, I'd be curious your thoughts on this, is, across multiple different customers, everybody kind of starts with the cloud data platform. So whether it's a Snowflake, an Azure, a Databricks, a Google, et cetera, any of the major cloud providers, what's interesting is we watch our clients who, Luke, to your point, use different platforms for different things. We watch them have to install different full teams to support them. And so
Absolutely. That's what you end up with, right? When you have
Yeah.
one platform that is with a set of engineers that are supporting that platform, and then another platform that with engineers supporting that other platform. And what you're looking for is how do you layer on solutions and products that support that, the underlying technology, the underlying platform, if you will. I mean, they're all platforms, but how do you support the data platform from a much larger perspective? And that's where things get a little bit more complicated.
And I think that's where we see our customers say, oh, crap, we have some data in this platform, some data in this platform, because we didn't want to double up paying for storage and compute on the same data source. And so all of a sudden, now they have half their data in one, half the data in the other, all in the spirit of this modern data stack. But really, it just kind of turns into a giant nightmare to manage. So, Ryan, if you were working with, let's say, the CIOs of these companies, what would you say the value is in moving towards that one single, to Luke's point, kind of data platform, and approach there rather than starting to silo some of your technologies?
Yeah, what I would point out is that evolution that I think that let's call it the data engineering industry, right, is really kind of faced with right now, which is the same evolution that, well, quite frankly, the App Store at iOS and just the concept of SaaS applications was like 15, 20 years ago, which is they're going through this concept of applying software engineering principles, right, to now data feature development, AI, analytics sort of development, and things like that. And one of the reasons why I think that traditionally, when you think of, like, let's say a data engineer 10, 15 years ago, is a very different type of data engineering that is required than today, right? In some ways, data engineers and data scientists are required to be software engineers now, right? Talking about CI/CD pipelines, talking about how if I make this change here and this step along the journey of feature development for my data, I don't want that to break everything down the line of these multiple platforms that are going, right? And so that's what I mean by CI/CD, continuous development and delivery. But those are those things that really matter. And I think that you have to look at this from if you're anything in a CIO or a chief data officer side of things, you have to look at the impact that that has about finding the right talent, but also picking the right infrastructure, placing your bet in a system that is looking at it more from a software engineering perspective, that packaged experience of having a front end, a middle layer, and all those kinds of things like that, that is like more modular software. That's something that's very important that I would encourage all of us to be thinking about.
I love it. So as we think about, Ryan, piggybacking on your comments, we've established that the modern data stack has evolved tremendously, and within its evolution, what ended up happening was you have best in breed across all these different types of solutions, which then, to Luke's point earlier, requires business users, IT teams, et cetera, to think about what the best in breed is in each particular one. And when they acquire the best in breed softwares, it feels good, right? When you think about buying the best data transformation tool and the best data science tool and the best data warehousing tool, as a technologist supporting a business team, that feels good. I'm enabling my teams with the right tools. I guess, as we think about the challenge that's created, it's created, again, all these silos that we thought the cloud was going to solve by putting all your data in one, data platform or cloud platform, right? So I think we've established that the modern data stack has evolved. We've established that it has created its own challenges that businesses and organizations are dealing with today. So if we shift the focus to how we solve these particular problems moving forward, one of our main themes is to build apps, right? Build the concept that you can bring together a data source, some sort of modeling language, a visualization, et cetera, all in one app, or what we would call a business solution. How do you package up the data and expertise of somebody who sits in a particular vertical and deliver that to somebody else? So, Luke, as you think about what Sigma is doing in this space, how do you or Sigma think about creating this type of experience for your end users to help with this problem?
Well, I actually think we align in this one. Yeah, great. Thanks for the softball question. I appreciate it. So like when I think about this, the modern data stack concept, there is something that it gets right. And that is that at the core of everything that's offered, data in the warehouse or in the data platform is absolute number one. It is the center of the universe or the sun or whatever the solar system, and then you're operating around that. And so when we think about what Seek is doing and what Sigma is doing, is that we are both in agreement that at the data is at the heart of any organization, period, and that you should be living and working on top of that data platform. Of course, that's not many tools and products are not designed to do exactly that. Rather, their ultimate goal is to capture some of that data, hold it in tight, because that is how they lock down a customer and make sure that they don't go away, is because they have captured that data. If you think about it, then they create these APIs to make it really difficult. Again, you must have a certain set of skills to pull that data back out, bring it back in the data warehouse and hold it true, when at the foundation of this app that was created out here was nothing but some inputs to a table, and then there's some logic, a workflow of sorts that is happening. Whether it's simple or complex is very likely just some baseline logic happening. And then maybe there's some integrations that occur that, again, make life a little bit fundamentally easier, but not that much easier because you're only using part of it. And then the last bit is like, there's a UI. And so you have this that exists as an application, and then you have them that exist everywhere else, and they're sort of operating it as their own sons to capture data and keep it out of, again, fundamentally, keep it out of the warehouse based on the pricing model that's been put in place. So like the future, when we think about where we want to go, is how do we bring that all back to a single place, and that rather your organization is using various products that sit as part of this modern data stack. And that's really like what we want to change the message around. What is the modern data stack? The modern data stack are a set of tools and platforms that allow data to be the first and the center of an organization. And once you have that set up, then you're capturing the right information via an application designed on top of the warehouse and not living in its own universe. And then you have the collaborative efforts of that data that sits there, and your organization, depending on whatever skill set, they can all come together and work together on one platform rather than work on many different platforms with many different silos that exist that are customized for that. And I'm sort of going on a rant here, but we see this happening today already. There are CEOs like Klarna's CEO just recently saying, we don't need Salesforce, we don't need Workday, we're going to build those applications. They're going to build them, and of course, where's the data going to sit? At the heart, because and like this is like there's many organizations that have this thinking because they recognize that tools shape your thinking, and that because tools are shaping your thinking, if you pick something that isn't as sharp, like just like a standard Excel spreadsheet, or like write a little bit of code or whatever that platform that you're sort of picking, that tool shapes your thinking. It doesn't make you as strong at supporting your own organization. So again, another long response from me, but you pick the right topic and you get me worked up on this.
Yeah, I think it's great. Again, I'm curious. So, a couple things that I pulled from there. I think, one of the more important ones that I pulled from there was this concept that people in the market know how to build applications. They know how to build and solve problems.
Yes.
The question is, they're just solving it for themselves, and that's it.
Like they've only, the conversation is generally focused on like the IT person supporting the business team. And if we take that back a second and go, well, we're not like, are we allowing business teams to support themselves in providing the right technology in the right place? And how do we make it accessible for them to do those things? think that's like again, where we should be thinking about taking the modern data stack is more towards we're making the world more accessible, and the world being the world of data more accessible to drive organizations. Because remember back, like, again, 10 years ago, even being data driven, that would meant like you had a couple people in the organization that were able to use data and drive it forward. Now it's a question of like, who doesn't use data? Because I don't want them in my organization, because they're not baselining on something to drive your organization forward. And that's really, data is the baseline, and then you're using your knowledge and expertise to drive and make change and allocate resources in the right way.
Yeah, I think, and I think what's interesting is, if you think about, again, the term using data, if you think about, how many people across an organization use data today, I would argue again that definition has evolved. To your point, 10 years ago, it was 5 people in the organization that knew how to use something other than Excel. They either knew how to use SQL, they knew how to use Alteryx, they knew how to use any of these data transformation tools, they could write some sort of Python code, et cetera. In today's world, use data, in my opinion, takes on a different meaning, which is not necessarily a hard skill of saying, I know how to transform the data. It's I actually know how to use it to make a decision. And so I think if we think about the people that are using data to make decisions today, Luke, to your point, the volume of those people required in an organization is massive, because 10 years ago, you had 5 people who could deliver things to 5 people. In today's world, you have huge teams that can deliver huge volumes of insights and applications and things like that. And so, people on the, I'll call it the business side of the equation, being able to use that data to support a decision becomes critically important. So, Ryan, as you think about what Seek is doing and how we're building a platform to enable this interaction and this exchange of applications and business solutions to the business consumer, how are you thinking about building out a platform that helps connect those two groups of people?
Yeah, and I'll answer that. I think one thing I just want to kind of summarize for everyone here on the call too, which is that, let's be honest, the stack that we're all building today is built for engineers, right? It's not necessarily built for the end user that is actually probably the closest to the problem at hand, and the person that needs the analytics and the answers and insights the most. And so internally, we have this kind of saying, is like, hey, build apps, not stacks, right? And the whole point of that is that when we talk about application development, which can be a general term, but the higher level takeaway there is that it's important to understand that there's this distinction when we say build apps, and when we start talking about building apps for the data communities and the business analysts and the people downstream, applications are focused on the consumer of analytics, not the developers of analytics, right? And so from our perspective, when we set out to build our ML compute layer and all the necessary things, the app store, things to enable developers, yes, but it's with this hyper focus on the consumer data applications and analytics. And that requires a consolidation of multiple layers, right? It is that visualization component, that layer that you would typically see in a SaaS product, right? It's how do you explore the data? How do you visualize the data? How do you dive deeper into that? Shout out to Sigma for providing us that layer, right? In terms of that embedded experience. Then we go down into this middle layer of like, well, what are the features, the ML compute that's needed, the predictive analytics, the logic that goes into that application. And then that third layer is really about that modularity for the data sources, right? And we built this technology in our app development framework this way because we know that data sources will change. And we know that that has to be a modular component to this that won't break everything down the line. And so that's what I meant by software engineering, about creating the concept of an application that, hey, your schema from, let's say, Target versus Albertsons versus Walmart may change, but it's still fundamentally, if you define in the application the required columns of data, the optional columns of data, and the data types required to train the model, then you can change and swap out data sources, train the model on it, and you didn't have to rewrite that entire application time and time again, which is what you're seeing when we started talking about this concept of fragmented workflows in data and fragmented dashboards. And so there's sort of a very opinionated aspect here when we talk about app development and when we built our platform, which that's generally what we think.
Makes sense. We have only a few minutes left, so I want to end with one particular question, which is, uh, and Luke, I'll start and then I'll toss it over to you, which is, do you have a highlight of a customer example? You don't need to name the customer, but of a customer example that has started to think in this new way and has seen a significant ROI, from doing so. And I'll start with two quick examples on the Seek side. So, as Ryan pointed out, there's this concept of the app developer, the people that are building a solution. We have customers on that side of our equation that have built 15 times faster for 70% less cost by using the Seek platform, which essentially takes the best of the modern data stack and puts it all in one solution. And so, we have developers that are seeing significant increases in speed at a reduced cost because they don't have to go implement the entire modern data stack. And what that turns into is then on the flip side of the equation, the consumers that are looking for that business solution, instead of them having to go buy that or build that solution themselves, sorry, they're able to just buy that solution from the developer who has the expertise to build it. So in that case, we've seen customers that would have taken 9 or 12 months to build a business solution on their own end and had to go hire additional people and things like that, be able to buy an application and stand it up in less than 7 days to get the value from that particular business solution or that use case. So, Luke, do you have any examples off the top of your head just of highlight customer stories?
Oh, well, of course, came prepared today. So the first that I think about is that we've got someone in organization that is in the consumer goods space where they are having to manage their inventory in real time. So having to deal with real supply chain issues. Of course, you would imagine a world where what you expect is what you get, but the reality is that it's way more messy than that, and you need to be able to track these things live as they occur. So you need to be able to have a nice friendly interface for many users. For us, they're called users, but for them, they're just their employees, right? So for their employees, have this great way to work spreadsheet like, because again, people like to think in terms of a spreadsheet. That's the form factor I talked about it earlier, which is like, hey, you use what you know, and that's the form factor. The spreadsheet is pervasive in that sense of that people just understand that. So we have a part of our product has a spreadsheet like interface, and you're being able to enter and reconcile data in real time. So you're drawing in the data from the warehouse, you're seeing what the plan was, and you're having to adapt and reconcile in real time with the ability to write back. So for us, that little feature, that write back feature, unlocks this ability to create applications that start at a spreadsheet and scale to much larger solutions, things that our Seek is building here today, right? That's the beauty of where Sigma is taking the product.
I love it. And I think one thing that you hit on there is the scalability, which is one of the key components that everybody's looking for in the modern data stack. And I think something that both Sigma and Seek are focused on pushing for the future is, Luke, to your point, bringing in data as the center of everybody's universe when it comes to making decisions, but not limiting the amount of data you can have.
And I would, to the point you mentioned scalability, but having that scalable and live is the other piece. As soon as you're taking extracts, you have different sources of truth in terms of what it is, and then you're trying to compare numbers. When was your extract taken versus when mine was taken? And if, we got to export it to an actual spreadsheet to maintain, that's impossible. That workflow just does not maintain itself across dozens of people, maybe even hundreds of people working from a single location, a single file. You have to again build an application that supports that and can be sustainable and scale and accessible to it all.
I love it. Well, with that, I know we're up against time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap for the day. I think, again, key takeaways being the modern data stack has become unsustainable. Even though it has great intentions, it's, 100 different tools supporting 100 different things for, many different organizations that just become unmanageable. I think the second piece is, for the future, for organizations that are either in this journey, not seeing success, or trying to evaluate what they want to do, our recommendation is let's focus on a couple key concepts and technologies, focus on the business solution, and implement, the right tool and technology to better solve that particular problem. And I think, Luke, to your point, having data that's live and scalable is critical to the success of every organization moving forward. So with that, I just want to say thank you to Luke and Ryan for joining us today. Thank you for everybody that joined the webinar today. Looking forward to hearing from you all. As you have questions, please feel free to reach out to both Seek and Sigma, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.